I want to talk about something that I think will take a weight off your shoulders. If you've gone through divorce and you are finally ready to date, but every single time you go on a date, you find yourself sitting in a car afterwards thinking, what am I even doing? These men just don't cut it. This episode is for you. Here's the truth nobody tells you. It's not that you're bad at dating. It's that you were never taught how to spot the red flags early. So you keep giving your time and energy to people who were never worth it in the first place. So today, my guest is walking us through 7 rules that show us exactly how to weed out the time wasters, step by step, so you can stop second guessing yourself and start spending your time only focused on those who are actually worthy of it. My guest today is Maria Cassano, who is a writer, editor, journalist, and author, and her work has been published in Huffington Post, Bustle, NBC, Food and Wine, Allure, and USA Today. She also writes about feminism, dating, and dissociative disorders on Medium and Substack, where she has a collective following of over 45,000 readers. Her debut memoir, Numb, Party of One, a memoir of healing from dissociation, is currently available for pre-order and hits shelves in February 2027. I happened to find Maria on Medium, where I also am a writer. And I read this article about the 7 rules for dating, and I thought, wow, those are really some amazing rules that can also apply to divorce, because when we get to that point where we are ready to date, we should be able to really internalize these rules and feel that they are really productive for us moving forward in this new wonderful version of ourselves. So here she is, and we are going to have some fun. Welcome to the podcast, Maria.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So before we dive into this wonderful article of yours about the 7 dating rules, tell me how this came to you.
Sure. So I will say I know that your podcast prioritizes women who are finding themselves after divorce. I am not divorced myself. I'm actually newly engaged, but I am a 35-year-old woman. I waited a long time to get engaged. And part of that reason is because I was in my late 20s, nearing my 30s. I was single and I was working on myself a lot. I was in therapy for a severe dissociative disorder and commitment issues. So I kind of came to 2 conclusions. The first is that I myself am a child of divorce. I watched my mom's friends and my friends' moms wake up in their 40s, uh, single. Some of them didn't have resumes, some of them didn't have jobs, some of them didn't have roofs over their heads, and they kind of needed to start over. So one of the conclusions I came to was that I never wanted to be dependent on a man for my survival. And the second was that because I had these commitment issues, I had built my life around myself. I had this house, I had a great career, I had a dog, I had friends. And as I was healing my dissociative disorder, I realized that I did want to share that with someone. I just didn't want to share it with just anybody. I wanted to find someone who was a genuine asset to my life because my life was already so full. So as I was dating, I went on a lot of dates before I found somebody. And as I was dating, these rules kind of became the foundation with which I weeded people out because I didn't want to lower my standards anymore. I only wanted to consider guys who were going to be a genuine asset to my life.
Okay, so I'm snapping because I love that. I love that you came to that realization. A lot of women don't, and they marry, end up, being with the wrong person, or they think they can heal or change somebody, which you can't. So the reason that I mentioned this already in the introduction, but the reason that I love this article so much is because when you go through the divorce healing process, you kind of, much like you coming to that realization as to what you wanted after all the therapy and all the deep work that you did on yourself, going through the healing process after divorce is a deep dive into a lot of that as well. And hopefully the women that are ready to date have done that, because you become this better, higher version of you. And that enables you to make the best choices for you because you're putting you first. So let's dive into this list. I love it.
Sure.
The first one on your list is one strike, you're out. So tell us about this, and then I have some questions for you on it.
Okay. So I believe that when people are dating, they should be putting their best foot forward. And I'm very big on reliability. I'm an extremely reliable, loyal person to my friends and to my family. So I expected that back. And I feel if a man can't put his best foot forward on the very first date while planning the first date, that's a problem. I also think that socially, women are conditioned to give people the benefit of the doubt, to see the potential in someone. And because of that, they often end up with people who are projects. They need work themselves. So for me, it was really important that the first time a guy showed any kind of red flag, which, it could be anything from unreliability, but it could also be something a little bit more indicative of abuse, like negging or, overtly sexual language. I was just done from that point on.
Okay. So the question I have is especially like in the, midlife arena, which, obviously you're not there, but I think and after divorce, anytime after divorce, but especially when you are a little bit of an older woman like myself and you go on a date. Yes, there are some things that are very clearly red flags. And I dated some of those guys and I was like, see you later. But what about the whole nervousness issue? What if the guy, plans the date okay, and you're sitting there across from him and he maybe says some silly things or some things that you go, oh, I don't like that. But what if it's just nerves? Like, should you give him another chance? How do you
I
tell?
mean, I don't consider nervousness to be a red flag. I think the most important
Right.
thing is self-awareness. I've said some dumb stuff on first dates, but I had the self-awareness to be like, hey, that was dumb. Let me rephrase that.
Mm,
So I think the self-awareness needs to be there.
okay. Okay. So if somebody says something that could be construed as a red flag, but they don't say something, should you say like, hey, was that a joke? Or I mean, I'm just trying to get to the point because I think as you get older it's harder to find men who have done work on themselves, especially when they've been divorced as well. So is there a it seems like a fine line with the one strike
Yeah.
you're out as far as it applies to dating men after divorce. And so I'm just trying to because I dated some guys who were really nervous and I could feel it, and so I would just crack a joke to try to cut through that. But is there any
Yeah.
advice you can give on that? Or yeah.
Yeah, I would say, and my later rules get into this, but see how they handle accountability. Say something
Okay.
along the lines of like, hey, I didn't really appreciate that, or,
Hmm.
did you
Okay.
think that that comment was inappropriate? And see how they respond to that. Because if
Yeah.
somebody does have a problem with accountability or with your boundaries and you call them out, that red flag will be abundantly clear. It's no longer just nervousness. Now it is a bright red flag.
True. Okay, and you're right, and you do talk about some of that. So let's talk about the second rule, which is to lead with baggage and expectations. Tell us about that.
Yes. So on every first date, I was extremely clear about the fact that I was in therapy for commitment issues. I was healing my dissociative disorder. I did not want children, and I was looking for an equal partner. And that told me a lot about the person across from me. First of all, it ensured that the person across from me was okay with mental health and doing work on yourself because so many women say that later on, when they're facing relationship issues, their partner is really, you know, opposed to couples therapy, which for me, that was so important to know that that was on the table if we ever needed it. Um, and the other two are just this is the life that I want to live. And if your lifestyle isn't, you know, if it doesn't match, then why are we wasting our time?
Right. So is there a line if you are a divorced woman, and I know it's hard not being one, but you saw your parents go through it. But if you are a divorced woman and you're a little bit older and you're going on a date with somebody, is there some kind of a line where you draw as to what that baggage is? Because I don't know. I mean, if you've gone through all that, you might have a lot of baggage with the divorce. And obviously, you're not going to bring that up and go, oh, my husband was this and that, and my ex, and he used to do this and that. But is there some kind of a line? Is it just kind of a casual, uh, these are my expectations type of thing? And I've been through some hard stuff.
Yeah, I personally believe that there is a huge difference between transparency and treating the date as if it's a therapy session. A huge number of women report that they'll go on dates with men, especially older men who, like you said, have had a lot of baggage, and they feel as though they're giving them a free therapy session because they're just sitting there and nodding and
Yeah.
that's exhausting. We are not trying to exhaust people on the other end of the date. We're just being clear about this is where I am, so if you're divorced and you have kids, maybe I'm divorced, I have kids. Is that okay? Is that compatible with your life?
Perfect. I love that. And I've read and talked to women who report that as well, about going on dates with guys, and it just turns into this whole thing about my ex-wife, and oh my gosh, and it was so hard. And it's like, okay, we're focusing on this. We're not focusing on what's back there. So I love that.
Yes.
Okay, number three, you say I only agreed to coffee for the dates. Tell us
Yeah.
why.
This one took me a long time to figure out. So if you're anything like me, you put a huge amount of effort into dates. You gotta shower, get dressed, put on makeup. Um, and to do all that on top of rearranging your schedule, oftentimes I found myself driving to a restaurant an hour away to accommodate where the man lived. It was so much time and energy just to get there and realize 5 seconds in, okay, this is not going to work. So eventually I just started meeting men in Starbucks on days where I planned to go there and read anyway. And when they showed up, I often had my head in a book. Um, and then if we were compatible in broad daylight, in the middle of the day, no alcohol in our systems, sitting on really uncomfortable chairs, I knew, okay, this is someone I can get along with, as opposed to, a lot of my friends really like going out for a drink with a guy, and they went, one in particular went out on several dates, several drinks with the same guy. And then when she invited him back to her house and they were no longer tipsy, she realized, oh, we're not compatible at all. It was the alcohol that was making us compatible. So huge, huge believer in meeting men for coffee. It's cheap, it's easy, it's low effort on your part. And if it's not working, you can just get up and leave after a couple minutes without it being awkward, as opposed to sitting across the table with someone for 2 hours on a date that, you don't want to be on or neither of you want to be on.
You're right, because that longer date feels like much more of a commitment. And then you feel bad, like if this isn't going to work. Do I get up and leave? Do I? Right. And I like that idea of really getting to know the real somebody, the real person, not just someone who's, alcohol is making them a little bit looser, a little bit freer, a little bit, yeah, more fun, whatever it may be. So that's
Yeah.
a great idea, to start with coffee. Okay, what about number four? I stopped planning dates.
Yes. Um, I'm a Capricorn with a stick up my butt. I'm a very particular person. And my need for control often manifested in me doing absolutely everything for my past partners. And statistically, women pick up the vast majority of domestic labor in their relationships, even when they're working, even when they're raising kids. They're doing all of it by themselves. So for me, to resist the urge to plan the date and say, okay, pick a place, pick a time, it was difficult for me. But I needed to take a back seat and see if a man was capable of taking that initiative. Because if a man isn't even capable of finding a coffee house in the vicinity and picking a day or time, um, then he's not going to be able to help me with
Yes.
my life. He's not going to be able to pick up any of the domestic labor. He's not going to take responsibility or initiative for the own things in his life. So,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And that's an epiphany, really, because you're right. So many women, and I'm one of them. I wore the pants in the relationship for 30 years, and did everything. And not just the domestic stuff, but well, I guess that kids are considered part of the domestic stuff. But I mean, I raised the kids, I took them to all their things, I cleaned the house, bought things for the house, fixed the house, did all the grocery shopping, did all the cooking, I took care of the dog. It was it's a lot, and a lot of women are in that position because we are caretakers by nature, most of us. And I love that idea of just kind of letting it go. And my current partner is very capable of doing all those things. In fact, I told him at the beginning, like, I'm done being the one that does everything and picks everything. And he'll say, you want to go away? I'll go, yeah. He said, where do you want to go? I'm like, I don't know, you pick. And he plans the whole thing, and it's fantastic. So I love
it
that
is the most
idea.
attractive thing.
It is very attractive. For me, coming from where I did, it was a pleasure to be treated as just me and just kind of be in my feminine and not have to worry about taking care of it, planning the date and doing this and doing that. And yeah, so
Yeah. Yeah. And this is a separate article, but once I had met my partner and we had gone on a couple dates, my now partner, I invited him back to my house and I made dinner. And this is the most attractive thing any man has ever done. He got up without asking me once we were done, and he just started washing the dishes. He didn't ask, where's the sponge? He didn't ask, should I do this? He didn't. And I said, okay, here's a man who can take initiative and feels comfortable maybe switching up those roles when it's appropriate, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's, like I said, I didn't need a man to buy me a house. I didn't need a man to fill my bank account. I need a man who's going to be an asset to my life. And without asking, he showed that he has that initiative. So that initiative carried through from planning the date, and he does those things now in my life, and it's wonderful.
Ah, I love it. I love it. And again, I think with the younger generations, there are a lot of young women in their 20s who, well, my son tells me this, and they are looking for a man to do everything. And I think that's very different. We're not kind of alluding to that here. I mean, you and me, we are both women who are self-made women. We have jobs, we work, we like to take care of ourselves. And so we're coming from that. You're coming from, you're a very strong woman. I'm a very strong woman. And then I went through something very challenging, but I still know that I don't want someone to just buy me a house either and a car and put me there but to take care of you in those ways and kind of make life a little bit easier and be a unit instead of just me doing everything. And maybe sometimes hey, can you come help? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
And
wonderful.
in
And
my
it
journalism
starts with,
career, I
yeah.
have interviewed a lot of divorce lawyers. I've interviewed a lot of couples therapists, and overwhelmingly now they're saying that the main concern from women is that they're doing it all by themselves.
Yeah, oh yeah. And I can tell you that too as a divorce healing coach. Same thing. Yes. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of mixed messages though too for both sexes, in society, just what the messages used to be from, our parents' generation and now for little boys and little girls, what they're being told is a little bit different. It's not like don't be a sissy. It's like share your feelings, young man, little boy.
Hmm.
And so things have changed, and I think it's sometimes hard to navigate. But I love this idea of knowing what you want and looking for a partner who truly wants to help you from like their core, not just
Yeah.
because they have to or they feel they or because they were asked. And I love that. So let's move on to number 5. You say, I counted how many questions guys asked me on the date. Tell us
Yeah.
about this.
So I had this epiphany after dozens of dates where I realized I am just a sounding board for these men. It doesn't matter what I look like. It definitely doesn't matter what I say because I'm not saying anything. So many men went the entirety of the date without asking me a single question about my life. And I would leave the date being like, wow, that was terrible. And 9 out of 10 times I'd get a text that said, like, wow, that was great. When can we do it again? And then I realized I call it the Little Mermaid effect, where a woman can sit there and say absolutely nothing, like Ariel from The Little Mermaid, who got her voice taken away. And these men completely fall in love with them. And it's almost, and I believe it's because when men have largely been conditioned to look at a woman rather than who she is. Okay, how do you make me feel? And if a man is just talking, 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 and a woman is just listening, 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 that man walks away from that date feeling so heard and so understood and so free and so light. It ties back to that. A lot of women feel like therapists while dating, which
Mm-hmm.
is statistically proven. So for me, counting the amount of questions that a man asked me was a very easy way to measure, do you care about me? Do you care about getting to know me at all? And
Right.
with my first date with my, now fiance, I completely lost track of the amount of questions that he asked me. It genuinely seemed like he cared about getting to know me.
Yeah. Wow. It's really interesting when you think about that. And I think there's definitely a difference after divorce between the men who have healed and the men who have not. And, when I started dating, I waited 2 years after my divorce to heal and do all the work until I felt like, okay, I'm ready to date. And it was wonderful because I knew who I was, I knew what I wanted, I knew what I needed. And at the time I started dating, I wasn't looking for, a partner. I just wanted to have fun. I wanted to meet some great men, and I was dating lots of different men, and it was wonderful. But I did notice right away the difference between the men who have healed, who have also been through divorce and have healed, and those who have not. And those who have not is like, okay, that's it. Because a lot of men who don't have kind of the right support network don't do the healing work. And it's really interesting, and not I'm not dissing on you guys, but just from what I've seen from where I sit as a healing coach, I used to counsel men too. Now I pretty much just do women. But what I see is the men, a lot of men would get divorced, and it was like the starting gate dropped and they ran off into sleeping with everyone, dating, whatever, whatever, having fun. It's like, and a lot of the women, the gate went down and they invited their friends over on their side of the gate and hugged and cried and talked about, and started the healing journey. And so, not to say that all men don't heal, because my partner did a lot of healing work and a lot of men do. But I think when you this point that you have about the counting the questions asked about you is so valid in this situation after divorce with the men, and just being able to recognize who's healed and who hasn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And, statistics show that women will take longer to get over a breakup, but once they do, they're done. A lot of men, when asked, do you regret your past relationships or do you regret, do you miss them? They will say yes. And I think the reason is, again, not all men, not all women, but I think the reason is for the what you just described, when women are feeling their pain, they sit with it. They invite their friends over, they
Mm-hmm.
process it, largely because we are culturally allowed to feel our emotions. Men are culturally not allowed to feel their emotions. So what do? They push it down, they push it away. So I think it's the men that took that opportunity that you were talking about to realize, wow, my marriage just imploded. Let me get to therapy. Let me think about these things. Let me feel these things. And you can
Yeah,
really tell the difference because the men who have gone to therapy and who've processed these things are not treating the dates like therapy because they have another outlet for that.
exactly. And you can feel it not just in the responses, but in the presence, the eye, communication, looking at you, not just kind of looking all around or picking up them. I mean, you can really feel that presence with somebody who has done the work. And so,
Yeah.
ladies, if you are on a date and you don't feel that, and you feel the shiftiness, or maybe pretty lady walks by and he's doing this, um, yeah, it's not difficult to tell he hasn't done the work. And if you're having a hard time figuring it out, then you probably might need to do a little more work on you. So yeah, so thank you. That's a great one. Okay, this one we might have some pushback on. I always paid.
Yes. This is my one rule that worked for me.
Hmm.
Actually, the last two worked for me. I would not necessarily say that it needs to work for anybody else. I paid because it was a way of maintaining control. So many men, at least the younger men that I was dating, treated dating as a sexual transaction. So they paid the bill,
Mm.
they felt entitled to my body. And I have some sexual trauma. So for me, I'm not even going to let you do that. I was also privileged enough to be in a good position where I could pay the entire bill. Obviously, that got cheaper once we started doing coffee. But for me, I always picked up the entire check. And it was about maintaining control and making sure that these men did not feel entitled to my time, energy, or body. But it was also a really interesting litmus test because right now, a lot of young men are very conservative. They have really traditional mindsets. And a woman paying for them brought up some really interesting reactions.
I read
It
that in your
was,
article. Yeah.
yeah, it was either some of them threw temper tantrums and they were like, I will not let a woman pay for me, which obviously is not going to work for my lifestyle because I already own a house. Like, I don't need you financially. I want you emotionally and vulnerably and to be, an asset in other ways. But then there were the men who kind of crossed their arms and sat back and said, well, it's about time, women are gold diggers. And that's not going to work for me either. So my man was just like, hey, are you sure? Okay, thank you so much. I'll get the next one. And that told me everything I needed to know about him. He was confident, he was secure in himself, he was not uncomfortable with, sharing financial burdens, which I think in this day and age, men and women need to do. We need two incomes to support a household. So it told me everything I needed to know about him. So it was both a means of maintaining control over the situation, but it also told me a lot.
Wonderful. Yes. I think that's interesting. When I started dating, I hadn't dated in over 30 years. So but I was excited. Like I told you, I wasn't nervous about it. And I was meeting these great guys. And instinctively, because I have several businesses and I own my own house and all of that, and I am self-sufficient. And I, like we talked about earlier, instinctively, I would always, when it was time to leave, reach into my bag to get my card. And the guys who, I mean, because I only dated guy. I mean, I really knew who was the right guy to date just from the beginning anyway, because I was, I had done so much work. But it was interesting when I would pull this card out, they would just kind of like, oh, put that away, please. And it was interesting to me because, like we talked about that whole men just offering to do things and let you kind of be the feminine. I thought that was really attractive. And again, it was never, we didn't go out to these, $200, $300 dinners. And it was just conversation. I never felt like this guy wants me to go have sex with him afterwards. I never had that. There was never any inappropriate sexual innuendos or anything like that. So for me, when I would offer, which some of my friends was like, don't even do that. And, why are you? And I'm like, I don't know. It's just, I just do that. It's just natural. And so I would take it out and to be told, it's okay. And it wasn't like, oh gosh, no. It was just like, hey, it's okay. I got it. Really. I really enjoyed this. It was a pleasure speaking with you and it was a lot of fun. And so anyway, I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess
I
intuitively I tried to pay or tried to help. I tried to help. But
right.
yeah, I think
And
you just do what feels right.
this is a rule that I don't know if I would have this rule if I had to go back. I mean, I don't think I would ever go back into the dating game. I think I would just be alone for the rest of my life. But if I had to go back into the dating game, I don't know if I would follow this rule myself
Hmm.
because I think so much of my healing journey, I continued therapy after I met my partner and I healed so much more. So much of my healing journey has been, okay, what is feminism for me? And what is hypervigilance? What is I'm a strong, independent woman and I can do this by myself, or I don't feel comfortable relying on anybody else because I'm afraid that they're going to leave, or I don't want to be
Mm.
reliant on them. So my partner still kind of fights me a little bit where he'll be like, no, I'm going to pay for this. No, just let me buy this for you. No, let me take care of this. And
Yeah.
I find that very attractive. This is one of those rules where I see both sides of it
Yeah.
because financially, women, dating for women is a lot more expensive. We need to do our hair, we need to do our makeup, we need to do our nails. Research shows that women spend $250,000 on their appearance throughout their lifetime. And as opposed to men who often like wake up barefaced and go into work, they're respected. Women
Right.
need we
Right.
believe we need these things because we're taught we need these things to feel good about ourselves. So financially, women spend a lot more getting ready for dates. So some women feel, okay, the least you can do is pick up the check. But there's also the fact that to meet up with a man that we don't know, we're theoretically putting our lives on the line. Dating is a lot more risky for women. So a lot of women feel the least you can do is pick up the check. So again, this is a rule that for
Mm.
me, paying worked. For a lot of other women, I completely
Yeah.
understand if they never want to pick up the check ever and they think the man should totally pick up the check.
Yeah, I mean, you've brought up some extremely valid points, and the whole thing about is someone entitled to a part of you physically because they paid, or the safety issue and all of that. So yes, it's definitely a gray area, and I think listeners and viewers, they need to make a decision based on what they feel is right. But I like that idea of, you had that instinct to just do it, and I had that instinct to maybe, I don't know, when I brought out my card, whether I was anticipating paying for the whole thing or just like contributing. Because, I think, I guess I felt that he doesn't have to pay for the whole thing. But again, it was a nice gesture. So,
Yeah.
okay. This last one is fun and I love it. And I can't wait to talk about it with you. I never ghosted. Tell us about that. That's a big
Yes.
thing now.
Yeah. So, I do mention in the article, Jenny Young's The Burnt Haystack Method, and she advises against this. She says, you don't owe anybody an explanation. The second he messes up, just disappear. Uh, I didn't ghost, not for the man's benefit, but for my benefit. I developed a dissociative disorder because my whole life I had been obsessed with being the good girl, with being palatable, with being silent, with accommodating everybody around me. And I found it very difficult to say out loud what I needed and to draw clear boundaries. So for me, telling a man why the date didn't work, why I had no intention of seeing him again, was an exercise in using my voice. And it came in handy in my relationship now because if something happens, if I don't like something, whereas in the past I would have just swallowed it and, pushed down my emotions and just dissociated through it, now I say, hey, I didn't like that. This made me feel this way. So again, this is another thing that taught me a lot about the man who I was dating because some guys, when I gave them what I felt was kind but polite feedback, they completely freaked out. They called me every nasty profanity under the sun, which showed me, okay, this man cannot take accountability at all. So that further solidified, okay, I made the right decision here.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So I love that line of thinking that you mentioned, which is I think ghosting is very disrespectful. And that's just my personal opinion. I think, and some of the reasons that I feel that way is exactly what you mentioned, which is speaking your truth and being authentic. And you go through all this healing work after divorce to be a woman who uses her voice, not a woman who kind of holds back and I had an experience. I was, again, I told you when I first started dating, this was years ago, and I was going out with some great guys, and I had reached out to someone who was a friend of a friend on Facebook, and seemed like a great guy, and I was told he was a great guy, and he was also divorced, and I reached out and I said, "Hey, would you like to get together for a coffee or tea sometime? I'd love to meet you." And at the time, he said, "Well, I just started seeing someone, and blah blah blah, and whatever." So a few months later, I get this message as I'm sitting in a restaurant with a girlfriend, and he says, "Hey, is that invitation still open?" And I was actually waiting for my girlfriend. She was late, and I was on my phone just scrolling because I was bored, and it popped up. And so I was right in the second, and I replied in the second, which, I guess you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to wait, and all of a sudden I don't play by those stupid rules. So
Yeah, neither do I.
I play by like what I feel. So this message popped up, and so I read it, and I was like, oh, that's great. And so I immediately texted him back. Not like I was, oh my God, I got to do it right now, but I was just sitting there, like I said, I had nothing to do. And so I texted him back, said, hey, thanks for reaching out. Yeah, I'd love to. I'm available next week on these days. Let me know if those work for you. Total silence. The next day, I don't know. I thought maybe he didn't see it. And I was like, hey, did you see my message? Total silence. And that was it. I said, okay, this is so not mature. This is just
Yeah.
a man who clearly needs to do some work. And I wrote a blog about it, and I ended up writing an article about it. And it was my first experience with ghosting. And I just thought that's so rude. And did I
Yeah.
not play by those bullshit rules, as Vishen Lakhiani says, the bullshit rules, right? Which are, because people told me after, I'm like, why would someone do that? And he asked me out. Oh, because you answered too fast. I'm like, am I supposed to look at the clock and say, okay, it's been this time now I can answer? Anyway, so
Supposedly,
that was
yeah. But if you're
yeah,
playing those psychological games while you're dating, you're going to bring those into your relationship. Like, I have no time for
exactly.
psychological games.
Exactly. And I'm just me. I'm honest me. I speak my truth. I'm not afraid to do that. I never have been. I've always had, a voice. And I think after divorce, my voice got even bigger. And
Yeah.
I don't care anymore. It's like if you do not want to be with me or you are going to treat me in a disrespectful way, I don't want you to be with. I don't want to hang around with you. So
Yeah.
anyway.
You had mentioned that, I think you had mentioned that you didn't do dating apps. You were meeting people organically, right?
Mm-hmm. I
Okay.
was.
So I think it's much harder or much ruder to ghost someone that you know in person or a friend of a friend.
That's
I
true.
think
That's
the
true.
thought process with the dating apps is it's just like person after person after person after person. Like for me, it was rapid fire. And I also think, the author of the Burnt Haystack Method mentions that sometimes ghosting is the safest option for women.
Oh,
For
yeah.
me, there were
Good
two
point.
men that were borderline stalking me. And so I did ghost them and block them because that was a matter of my own safety. I will also say I still stand behind letting people know why you're not going to continue dating them. But the second they get aggressive or abusive, feel free to block
Mm.
them. You should block them. And also, I would always recommend giving this feedback through text when you're safely far away from men
I was going to
because
ask you that. Hmm.
yeah, as previously discussed, some of these men
Yeah.
got really violent through text. So protect yourself while doing this.
For sure. That's such a valid point. Thank you for bringing that up. And that makes so much sense. If you are with anyone who makes you feel afraid for your safety in any way, yes, that is okay. That is okay to ghost. And yes, I was
Yeah.
coming from a different place. I was coming from just meeting people organically. I don't even remember. I mean, I remember friends telling me when I got divorced, like, you have to go on the apps, Rachel. You have to go on the apps because you can't meet anyone. They're not going to come knock on your door and go, hey, I'm a guy and I want to go out with you. And I said, yeah, but I feel confident that, it's not like I sit in my house all day long. So I feel confident I'm going to be out with girlfriends or I'm going to be somewhere fun and my energy will attract fun people. And it did. And I was very lucky in that way because I know a lot of clients don't have that experience. So
Yeah.
going on
I
those
do
apps is
sit in
a
my house all day. So
whole, yeah, well, I do now for work,
right,
but yeah,
exactly.
but you're in a relationship, I'm in a relationship, so that's different. But if you are still, in that, like if I were still out there, I wouldn't be sitting in my house every night. I'd be like, let's go do some fun stuff and with my
Yeah.
girlfriends, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, I love that. Thank you. This has been really enlightening, and I love your list. I hope that it provides some information for the listeners and the viewers, and great tips on how to date. Thank you so much
Thank you
for
so
being
much.
here. Yeah. If you are a woman healing from divorce, please know that this podcast is a very safe space for you. I love bringing amazing guests like Maria to come each week and sometimes talk about things out of the box, sometimes talk about things that we all know about when we're trying to heal, because I think it really provides you the information to start that self healing journey. And thank you for being here. Please subscribe so you can get all these good, juicy episodes. And please like and share. And see you next time.